Dan, you are live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the February 10th, 2021 meeting of the East Lansing Planning Commission. I would ask Mr. Haywood to call roll, but I'm not seeing him on my screen. There we go. Mr. Haywood, would you please call roll?
Thank you. And just a reminder to announce your location and that you're attending electronically. Chairperson Boyle.
Or
wait a minute. When did I get promoted?
Excuse me, Bowman. Starts with a B.
that's fine. We could switch tonight. Daniel Bowman attending remotely, in attendance, attending remotely electronically from East Lansing in Ingham County.
Vice Chair Boyle.
Thank you. Kathleen Boyle attending electronically from East Lansing, Michigan, Ingham County.
Cahill.
John Cahill attending remotely from East Lansing, Michigan.
Sullivan.
Joseph Sullivan attending electronically from my home in East Lansing, Michigan.
Williams.
Cynthia Williams attending electronically from my home in East Lansing, Michigan.
Commissioner Wolf.
Here attending remotely from East Lansing.
Commissioner Lapine. And Commissioner Wagner.
I'm here attending remotely from my house in East Lansing, Michigan.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. And I will thank everybody once again for their continued patience as we continue to work with this not so new technology. We'll remind all members of the public that they will have an opportunity to address the commission during public comment and during each public hearing. Each commission member will be called on individually to speak during each item. A commission member may say pass if they do not have a comment for that item. Commission members are reminded to state their name before speaking and making a motion, etc. And all votes of consequence will be taken with a roll call vote. That said, we'll move us on to item 1.2, approval of the agenda. You all have a copy of the agenda in your packets or in front of you. I will entertain a motion to approve that agenda.
So
Kathleen Boyle, so moved.
It's been moved by Vice Chair Boyle.
Wolf, second.
Thank you. And seconded by Commissioner Wolf. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. Let's do a roll call vote here, or excuse me, let's do a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed, that motion carries. On to item 1.3, approval of the minutes. We have 2 copies of minutes in our packet this evening. The first for January 13th, 2021 meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Commissioner Cahill, so moved.
Sullivan, second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Cahill and seconded by Commissioner Sullivan to approve the minutes of the January 13th meeting. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. Again, let's do a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, that motion carries as well. And then finally, the minutes of the meeting of January 27th, 2021. Once again, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Wolf, move approval of the January 27th minutes.
It's been moved by Commissioner Wolf. I thought I heard a second.
Support Commissioner Cahill.
Thank you, Commissioner Cahill. To approve the minutes of the January 27th meeting. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, seeing none. Once again, I'll call for a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And those opposed, that motion carries as well. That'll move us on to item 2. We don't have any committee reports. And then on to item 3, staff reports. Mr. Haywood.
Thank you. The only item that I have to report on is that we have received an application for 133 Evergreen. This is the graduate building for their special use permit for the rooftop restaurant and cafe to serve alcoholic beverages. we'll probably see that come through on March 10th. That's all for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Haywood? Right. Oh, Commissioner Cahill.
I'm just wondering, as a point of order, what galaxy Jake's attending from.
You had indicated earlier that, well, go ahead.
It's to save you all from having to look into my closet because we don't have any we don't have any closets in this old house. So we have a lot of clothes storage in the office.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 4, commissioner announcements. Does anybody have anybody other than Commissioner Cahill have any announcements?
I do real quick. My third was just born this week. So
Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations.
thank you, everyone.
Congratulations.
Name.
It's a boy. It's Parker Ryan Sullivan. So we go boy, girl, boy. It's my
Oh
third.
my gosh.
Congratulations.
Nice.
Yes.
Everyone's well, I presume?
Well as can be.
There you go. Get some sleep. Any other commissioner announcements? All right. That'll move us on to item 5, communications from citizens. This is the time in our meeting where we invite members of the public to speak to the commission on items that are on our agenda or items that may not be on our agenda. Each caller in our queue will have 5 minutes to address the commission. At the end of 5 minutes, they will be placed back on mute. Callers will be identified by the last 3 digits of their phone number. When called on, you will be unmuted. If you do not wish to speak, please indicate so by saying pass. If you do wish to speak, please clearly state your name and address before addressing the commission. This is not a requirement, but it does help our clerk keep accurate minutes of our meeting. On that, I'm presuming that Ms. Ordialis is keeping the gate today, or Mr. Parcell?
You have no attendees.
Okay, that makes it easy, doesn't it?
Yes.
Then we will move on to our next item, which is a public hearing. Item 6.1, this is consideration of a modified site plan application from FP Investors for the property commonly known as Falcon Pointe to convert the vacant manufactured housing units in the center phase of the development to 12 attached ranch units in 4 buildings. Ms. Schmidt?
Yes, thank you. This property is located in the northern tier on the south side of State Road near the corner of State and Chandler Road. This property came into the city with a 425 agreement made on May 5th, 1998. It was further amended on June 11th, 2001 between the Charter Township of DeWitt and the city of East Lansing. The original plan was approved for 280 manufacturing housing units on 55.7 acres in the mid to late 90s, prior to the property being brought into the city. The 57.7 acre site is zoned R2, medium density, single family residential district. The east side of Falcon Pointe development includes 19 duplex units, 14 threeplex units, and 10 fourplex units, constructed for a total of 120 units. Of the 31 manufacturing housing lots that were on the site, there are, I believe, 18 lots occupied. The single family portion of the development on the west side of the site is more than halfway built out with approximately 1,350 square foot units. There are currently 67 of the 102 single family sites either occupied or under construction at this time. The applicant is proposing to convert the 12 vacant manufactured housing lots to multiple family lots in the center area of the development. This will allow for the construction of 12 2-bedroom attached ranch residential units in 4 separate buildings, adding to the previously constructed 120 dwelling units for rent of the same design on the property. This will leave 1 vacant manufacturing housing space west of the proposed units. The units would only require minor modification for utilities that are already in place. There may be areas that are within the 100-year floodplain. There are several areas within the site Therefore, in order to get approval for building permits, they'll have to provide additional floodplain information that relates directly to each of the units. There are no major concerns with other city departments on this project. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from Ms. Schmidt?
Let me unmute. There we go.
There we go. Vice Chair, please.
These are rental units. Are they primarily student occupied or mixed? Or?
They are a mix. There are students in there, but it's a mix of uses. I actually had the opportunity to speak with one of the, she's 94 years old, one of the original residents of the manufactured housing. And I've worked on this project through all of the review processes, and they are really pleased with having the development out there and having things cleaned up. I don't know if you recall, but they had quite a mess out there for years. So yes, and it is definitely a combination.
Well, I hear the need for housing for families with young kids, and although 2-bedroom unit might not be ideal, it would certainly suit some families.
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf.
In that regard, I noticed in the materials from the applicant that they claim that it is targeted towards empty nesters. They say it's not restricted by age or any other category, but that's who they're targeting. They didn't say how the actual occupancy was breaking down at this point. But I have one minor but kind of surprising little, there's a discrepancy in the city's the applicant's form, the city application on the 3rd page of it, which is actually page 27 of the 50-page PDF. Towards the bottom of the page, they're telling how many units are here, and it says they're proposing 24 2-bedroom units with 48 parking spaces. That's just plain a mistake, right?
Correct.
Okay.
The plan that you have in front of you showing the 12 units is what they're proposing.
Okay.
Any other questions for Ms. Schmidt? All right, then. Is the applicant in attendance this evening? Sorry, I'm checking my, we do have one attendee. Mr. Ackerman? I'm trying to get a sense from staff. Is this our applicant? Oh, thank you. Could Ms. Urdalis, could you invite? There we go. Thank you.
All right. Can you hear me?
Say what I mean, I guess. Yes, Mr. Ackerman, welcome.
There we go. Good evening, everybody. Yes, my name is John Ackerman with Atwell. John DePore, the developer for the site, was trying to get in, but for some reason the link didn't work for him, and he was told it was a private meeting and he couldn't get through. So he was trying to get in. I'm not sure what happened there, but yeah, I can answer any questions you have. I know that once upon a time when this development went, because I've been involved as long as Darcy, well, a little bit less than Darcy, because I know she's been involved since before we were looking at redeveloping the site. But I do remember our first meeting, we came to City of East Lansing to sit down, and we're kind of bombarded with a lot of unhappy clients based on the previous developer's state of maintenance for the project. And I know John and his team worked hard to appease all the current clients and residents. And I think, I asked him before this meeting if he had heard any comments or complaints or anything from the existing manufactured housing residents, and he said he hadn't heard anything in quite some time. Everyone seems to be very, very happy with it. And you are correct, when this project first started, the product that is shown on this is typically a age-targeted product, a single-story ranch-type product that is catered towards that demographic, but they did not want to limit or restrict to that demographic. They opened up to anybody, and it's a really nice mixture of all kinds of demographics that are living in there right now. So they continue to target that demographic just to let them know that they're welcome, but there's a good mix of students and families and everything kind of living in there right now.
Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. Any
You're welcome.
questions? Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Wolf?
Yes, the supporting letter about this says that the individual units are renting for $1,500 to $2,000 per month. And I was wondering why a range there? The 12 new units are all identical, I believe, from what I read.
They are.
Are some of the other ones different?
No, all the units are identical. I would have to speculate on that. I have a feeling it depends on how long their lease term is. If it's a shorter term, they might rent for a little bit more. If they rent for a longer term, they might give them a little bit of a discount. That's kind of par for the course there, but I can't give you a finite answer on why that's happening.
Okay, but the new units are pretty much duplicate of what's there already.
Correct. They're identical. These buildings are identical to the ones already constructed.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, I'm seeing no hands, and so I'll take this opportunity to open up the public hearing for this application. Any members of the public who would like to speak on this application? I'm checking our list here. We'd invite you to come forward now. Mr. Ackerman, looks like you're the only one. You're certainly welcome to say something more if you'd like, but I'm presuming that we'll not get any other comments from other public. And that being the case, we'll close the public hearing and return this back to the committee. I saw a note in our packet that indicated that, in fact, there was text offered in case the commission was inclined to act on this matter this evening. What is your pleasure? Commissioner Wolf?
I'll move to suspend the rules in order to vote on this tonight.
Thank you.
Boyle, second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Vice Chair Boyle to suspend the rules and permit the commission to act on this application this evening. Is there any discussion on that motion? Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, I would just comment that I see that everyone else living in that area was notified of the meeting, and we haven't heard anything from them. So I think we can assume that everyone who's living there now is pretty happy the way it is, and they're not concerned about this change. So
it also seems as if the product that's being offered, that's being proposed here, has been pretty successful and likely to continue in that success with this next, well, I guess this final group of build out, this final group of buildings. Any other discussion? All right, Mr. Haywood, could we please have a roll call vote for this is to the vote to suspend the rules?
Bowman,
Yes.
Boyle,
Yes.
Cahill,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Wolf,
yes.
and Wagner.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. On that note, we're sort of permitting ourselves to act on this evening. Is there a motion to proceed? Commissioner Wolf?
I'll move that we recommend approval of the request from FP Investors LLC for modified site plan and cluster development plan approval for the property more commonly known as Falcon Pointe at the south side of State Road near the intersection of Chandler Road to construct an additional 12 two-bedroom rental units, subject to the conditions, the 9 conditions in the staff report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Cahill, support.
Thank you. It's been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Commissioner Cahill to recommend approval of this application. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll ask for let's have another roll call vote. Mr. Haywood?
Okay. Bowman,
Yes.
Boyle,
Yes.
Cahill,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Wolf,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you. That'll move us on to item 7, or into our old business portion of our meeting, item 7.1, the consideration of a site plan application from 270 West Grand River Boulevard for the property at 270 West Grand River Avenue to demolish the existing structures and develop a parking lot. Is this you, Mr. Parcell?
Yes, it is.
Please.
Hello. So this is a rehearing, or not rehearing, but the follow-up meeting for the 270 West Grand River application, site plan review to turn the property into a surface parking lot. There were a few questions raised at the last meeting, your answers of which I put in the staff report. Sorry, my VPN freezes up sometimes, so it's a little slow to scroll through these PDFs. They submitted revised plans with revised landscaping and some revised setbacks. So staff communicated to the applicant that the Valley Court Park setback needs to be 8 feet from the property line. It's now shown there near the north entrance. And then the lot line along Delta Drive has been expanded to meet the 8-foot setback. Curbing was added along Delta Drive, and new curbing where the building would be demolished on the lots facing Grand River Avenue. Engineering responded in their comments, which were included in this packet, that curbing would be required under section 50-1816 subsection 6 of the city code. The plan states that there's 37 spaces, with 2 of them being barrier free, but there was not a breakdown of parking added as asked by the Planning Commission. Although the measurement of the new spaces is shown as 20 feet by 9 feet in the new parking spaces shown on the plans. The applicant, based on feedback from the last meeting, added 2 5-foot walks next to the entrances on Grand River Avenue and Valley Court to help pedestrians in and out of the parking facility. And then there was a question about lighting at the last meeting, and we sent it over to Tim Kirby, who's the city building plan reviewer, and asked him to review it. And he said that since the lighting meets what Dave and I have for the zoning code, the building and amount of lighting on site is fine with the building code, and he had no problems with it. So that's kind of an update on what we worked through with the applicant. There's new plans for you all to see. And then the landscaping was reviewed as well. There was only one comment that be added, and that was a variance for the planting bed along Grand River Avenue and Valley Court. They're only 5 foot wide, where 7 feet and 8 feet are required, but that's the only note we had there from Darcy. So I'm open for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Parcell? Commissioner Cahill.
Did I read the agenda wrong? I thought this was a motion to adjourn this to February 24th.
Yep. So we had not anticipated that we'd have enough time to review because we were not supposed to get the plans until this Monday, so 2 days ago. But we actually got them late Thursday afternoon, and we worked to review them as staff and put the staff report up. There's some confusion on updating the I-Compass item, which we had initially prepared, anticipating that we wouldn't receive the plans.
Okay, so my recollection's right that the agenda said there would be a motion to adjourn this.
Yeah, you're correct there. But there's another sample motion and conditions of approval in the updated staff report that are in here.
My concern is that I assumed this was being adjourned to the 24th. And I didn't review this like I would. I know I looked at it and saw some of the changes they made.
Was there anything in particular that stuck out to you? It seemed to me that your concern, my recollection, your greatest concern last month or the last time we met about this had to do with paths in and out. I actually, the early documents, or at least the first part of the documents in the set, seemed to have suggested that hadn't been addressed, but the later ones did. They not only their paths are significantly more planting, but a couple of paths in and out of the pedestrian paths in and out of the lot as well.
Mhm.
Commissioner Wolf, I thought I saw a hand. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Cahill, were you about to?
Yeah, I was going to say I had a couple of concerns the last time. One had to do with the lack of interior landscaping. And I noticed that they do have some landscaping islands that start on the perimeter and extend inward. I was going to have a question, does that comply with what's required that it be interior landscaping?
It does comply.
Okay. And I was looking at the plans. I didn't study them closely because I didn't think we'd be reviewing this tonight. I didn't have time to see what walkways they had in there.
Do you have the new packet in front of you? Do you think
No, I don't have. That's the problem for me.
Something that Rebecca might be able to pull up?
Can we pull that up? On the document I'm looking at, it looks like it's page 112 out of 217.
I'm working on it.
Thank you.
I got it up. Can you see it now?
There we go.
How about that?
Start. There we go.
Is the applicant here to explain the changes that they made?
It looks like we have another attendee, but I don't know. That's not a name I recognize. Ms. Schmidt or Mr. Haywood?
It's not a name I recognize as being associated with the application. Hard to pull up the attendee list with the full screen.
Are we still can we look at a page several down from this? Are we trying to find, there we go. Thank you. Keep coming.
Which
on mine, the packet that I'm looking at, it's page 112 out of 217. That's just the landscape plan, but it also shows the paths and
the landscape plan.
please.
It's 56 out of 57 if you're looking at the other
Thank you.
document.
Okay, let's try this one.
That's the wrong one, Dave.
It's the same, I think the same landscaper, but that looked like last month or last week's, whatever. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
That's it. So there's whoever has control of the cursor, there's a path that's immediately to the west of the inbound gate. And then there's a path that's near the southwest corner. There we go. That presumably could go in or out.
How do you know that's what those things are?
Oh, I'm only just looking because it says proposed walk. I mean, it does say a
Okay.
4-foot fence and proposed walk. That's, and I was looking for where they would be located, and that seems like a pretty logical place. It doesn't go through any parking space, and you know, they're sort of remote enough that you could take your pick and go north or south. Can't go west. Can't go east because there's a building there, but all right. I can't see it.
Almost. Sorry.
No, please proceed.
I was going to say, it seems like almost everyone that's going to be using it will be going west. And that's where there's no walkway.
That may very well be. All right. Any other concerns for the time being, Commissioner Cahill?
No.
All right. Commissioner Wolf, did I see your hand as well?
Yes. And actually, in response to that discussion, I think it's probably a good thing that there is no walkway on the west, or at least we don't want to encourage people to jaywalk across the street. So I think it's a good thing to some extent to bring them out to Grand River and then have them use the crosswalk to get over to the building. So I don't really see a problem with the lack of a walk over there. It's hard to picture the landscaping exactly with just a plan view, but I'm kind of encouraged by it. I mean, it looks as though the rest of the lot is pretty well bordered in a way that I hope people won't try walking through the landscaping. I guess it depends on exactly what it consists of, but they've pretty well blocked off the rest of it except where the walks are.
There are fences around the perimeter too. I'm just noticing that there's a note that indicates that there's a 4-foot fence.
Oh yeah.
At the
at least in some places. Is that it? Oh yeah, on the west side too. Yes, I see that. And then I just want to confirm that as it stands right now, the documents in support of this are pretty confusing because many of them don't show the updated plan. You know, there's just discrepancies because they've updated a couple of them and not the other ones. And I don't know if there's anything that can be done about that, but I had trouble with that for a while. And then in the staff report itself on page 6, there's a small error that also caused me trouble. It's the commentary about the new proposed walks. And it says they're included next to the entrances on Grand River Avenue and Valley Court. And I spent quite a while looking at the diagram, trying to find one next to the entrance, we'll call it on Grand River, until I finally realized it's not really next to it. It's off to the west. So I'd suggest changing that in the staff report.
Good note. Thank you.
That was all for now.
Mr. Purcell, would you mind asking I'm sorry, Commissioner Cahill, go ahead.
I'm glad to hear there's a fence. Do we know what kind of fence it is?
It might be on the next page.
There's the detail.
Yep, that's detail.
Could someone who understands the detail tell me what it's going to look like?
Yes, these are actually required by our design guidelines for the downtown area that's within the DDA. And it's just like the black fences you see around downtown, other parking areas in the downtown, the black aluminum.
Similar to behind Peanut Barrel, that parking?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, absolutely.
very good.
Any other questions for Mr. Parcell? Would one of you that has control of the mic please ask our attendee if they are here representing the this particular application? And if so, invite them to add anything. If not, welcome to our meeting, but we can't invite you to speak out on this particular matter.
Rebecca will have to do that. I don't have control right now.
I've given Beatrice
Yep. Ms.
permission
Malat,
to talk.
it looks like you're muted if you'd like to speak. There you go. Hello. Ms. Malat or Malot?
Yes, it's
There you
Mrs. Malone.
Yeah, thank you. Hi. Are you here to speak on this? Are you here as representing the applicant regarding this application?
No,
Okay.
we just live in Falcon Pointe right now. We're just wanting to know what's going on with the changes.
Sure. Actually, we just recommended approval of that. Those 4 units, 12 units, 12 4 units. To city council, so they'll see that at a future meeting.
Okay, so nothing's going to be done with our houses right now that are here.
I'm presumably not. I'm afraid I don't know what, to what.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, Ms. Schmidt looks like she has some response for you.
Yes,
Okay.
Beatrice, I would be happy to give you more details tomorrow if you'd like to call me. Would that be helpful?
That would be great.
Okay, my number, do you have something to write with?
Sure.
My number is,
Give me just sorry,
Sure.
give me just 1 second. Okay, go for it.
517-202-6524.
202-6524.
Yes,
And is there a particular time that would be better for me to call?
anytime.
Okay. My name is Claudia and I'm Beatrice's mom. So
Okay, great, Claudia. Thank you.
myself that calls. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Have a blessed night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
So the applicant is not here this evening. Are there any further questions for staff? Commissioner Cahill.
As I'm looking at this map, it appears there are 2 interior landscaping areas. Is that enough space as required in our standards?
Yes, that is the required amount of interior landscaping. They actually have a little bit more than usual. The top right corner is actually in excess of what they need, but they had to have street trees, so that's why they planted around those street trees.
Oh, so the top right corner, meaning on Laurel Valley, that's considered interior landscaping also?
It's considered interior for the landscaping, but we can't count it 100% because they still need those trees for the street trees. They need to have them every 40 feet. So the lower landscaping is a little bit extra.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I was asking whether they had sufficient landscaping area on the interior was looking at the 2 spaces in the middle. It didn't look like enough to me, but we're including other parts here.
The 2 spaces in the middle alone are sufficient.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions for staff? All right, and the pleasure of the commission, a motion would be in order. Commissioner Wolf.
I move that we recommend approval of the request from 270 Grand River LLC for a site plan to demolish the existing building and convert the lot to a parking lot, subject to the 10 conditions in the staff report of February 5th.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Boyle, second.
Been moved by Commissioner Wolf and seconded by Vice Chair Boyle to recommend approval of the application to City Council. Is there any discussion on that motion? Commissioner Wagner.
I see in the staff report that there is no requirement for lighting. The lighting on site is adequate. But number 6, the 6, under council recommendations, it says site lighting shall be installed in accordance with requirements. Does that just mean that there will be no? I don't quite understand suggested requirement number 6.
I could be mistaken because I didn't write the staff report, but I think what Mr. Parcell was trying to indicate was that the lighting that's been proposed is appropriate or adequate.
Yeah.
Is that the section you're talking about, Commissioner Wagner? The question regarding that was turned to the city plan reviewer?
No, there's a condition of approval that number 6 on page 6 of the staff report says about or discusses site lighting. I mean, ultimately, since site plans and everything are tied to the property, then if they make a lighting change or adjustment, then this would encompass, what they need to cover for lighting on site. But that is also the lighting that's proposed to be on site. It must meet this criteria as well for them to move forward with any sort of formal development. So for the site plan, this kind of will just bake in the requirement that they have to meet the city lighting code.
So nothing is required, but if they want to add something, it needs to meet the requirement number 6.
Yeah, and there is lighting on site already shown that meets the code. So.
Okay. Thank you. Any further discussion? Oh, Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand what was just said there and what's in the staff report. Is it saying that the existing lighting as of right now is sufficient and that is all the lighting that will be there? There's nothing more proposed or required?
There's nothing more proposed than what's in there right now. The way I view it is kind of as a catch-all for if anything is added in the future. But upon review with Tim Kirby for the building plan review, he said what's proposed is adequate for both for building and it's adequate for what we have for zoning. So lighting is inadequate, but that's just one of our boilerplate conditions of approval that's added on to site plan reviews to address the lighting on site.
Okay. You said a couple times that that's what is proposed is adequate. But I think what you really mean is what is already existing is adequate, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just say proposed for the proposal purposes of the application, but yeah.
Right, the existing and the proposed are the same in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Any other discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, let's, Mr. Haywood, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Sure. I actually I want to address the comment about lighting. We share what they propose for lighting. Just everybody's.
Okay.
Here's the parking lot layout. This is a photometric plan, so it shows where their light poles are going to be. And making the assumption that these poles are not there right now, that these would be new poles, since they're, I can't remember, Jake, maybe you can confirm that. I don't know if they're going to be mounted on the existing poles or if these are new poles, but anyway, the height, the placement, the shielding, and the light levels, the ground level all meet our code with what they're proposing to do.
Thank you. Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, sorry, but I've got to go back to what it says in the staff report. It's still very confusing. At the bottom of page 6, it has the question, is the lighting on site adequate for what is required on site? And to me, it seems though that's asking about the site, the existing site. And then it goes on to say that Tim Kirby indicated since the lighting does meet the zoning code, there is nothing else needed for lighting on site. The lighting is adequate. To me, reading through that says the existing conditions of lighting are fine and they're not going to change. Now, I understand what Mr. Haywood is saying about the diagram. It looks as though they are putting in new lighting.
I think that the point there is how it's written is my error in not making it clear enough grammatically. That was just from my notes of what we asked or was asked at the last meeting. We sent the photometric and the lighting information back to Tim Kirby and said, hey, can you just give us a double check on the lighting for this project? Planning Commission had some comments on it, and he said from a building perspective, it's fine. And then from a planning and zoning perspective, we're fine with it. It meets code. And then the condition of approval, furthermore, is just one of them that's included for all of our site plan review generally.
Okay, but they are indeed changing the lighting. They're putting in new poles, as Mr. Haywood indicated there.
Yeah.
All right, you might want to work on the wording of that just a little bit to clear it up. At least for me, it was hard to follow.
That confused me as well. I mean, I think 6 should say if lighting is installed, it shall be installed in accordance with requirements.
Fair
or
enough.
something. It just seems to me that number 6 is a requirement that lighting is installed.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be because it meets the current requirements.
Any other discussion on the motion? Mr. Haywood, could we please have a roll call?
Bullman,
Yes.
Boyle,
Yes.
Cahill,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Wolf,
Yes.
and Wagner.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. We have no new business this evening, so that will move us on to item 9. The next work session regarding the Shaping the Avenue document. Ms. Schmidt, I saw that you took the time to provide a summary of in this memorandum here. Would you like to start with that and then just proceed where we left off?
Sure. I think I had mentioned at the last meeting, I think to help anyone that is coming into the process at different times to watch the process for Shaping the Avenue. And some of them will have a lot of the same questions. So I've set this up. So as we go down and answer these questions, I'm putting just a really general statement of what the Planning Commission decided. That will also help me to make sure I mark off all the points within the document to change. So we will continue to do that. I know it will get to be a lengthy document, but I think it'll be beneficial having it all in one place. So tonight, if we can continue going through each one of these as far as we can get for this evening, I think that will be helpful.
Agreed. And by my count, starting with the document that you had sort of the summary questions you had provided at our last meeting, we were on item 9.
Correct.
And that's regarding asking for clarification about whether the architectural standards require overhangs or eaves. I think both Matt Hagan and Tim Rozowski brought this matter up. I'm afraid you've caught me flat-footed in that I'm trying to recall which page that was on, and so I'm looking for it now.
Page 45, I believe.
Thank you. There it is. Yep, thanks. I'll provide my best summary of the discussion, that, although you all have seen the text or the questions. I think Tim Rozowski's concern was that there are times when buildings are certainly built that don't have overhangs or eaves on them. The way I read this was that perhaps the intention was that if there is indeed an eave that's being built, it should be a minimum of six inches deep. But that's just my best recollection of, I'm sure we talked about this. I'm reasonably certain we didn't talk about it in great detail. I'm quite willing to hear what everybody else has to say about this. Is that Trinity College, Vice Chair?
Yeah, I thought I'd move for the discussion of shaping the avenue.
Beautiful building.
The long room.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, any other thoughts about the use of eaves or cornices or overhangs? I'll give you a chance to sort of redigest this. Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to make of this. I had not thought about the language the way it's written before. When I look at that, it's the D1 on page 45. It looks to me as though it is requiring eaves, and I can sort of see that given what I know about the original intent of the document to produce traditional looking buildings. I think that may very well be what they had in mind to require them.
I thought about that as well. Go ahead.
And I'm not real enthusiastic about making them mandatory.
Vice Chair Boyle.
Well, the introduction says the following configuration and techniques are permitted.
Mm-hmm.
So I read that to say you can do this, but if you do it, these are the requirements for it.
I might add that this is one of the details that I find fairly frequently in my own practice that is a regional detail that is that tends to get away from capital M international modernism, international modern modernism, whereas in this region we would typically build reasonably steep pitched roofs and reasonably deep overhangs in order to get the precipitation away from the foundations of buildings. And so appreciating what you've said, Commissioner Wolf, about the early intention of, or the early aim of the, of this code to direct sort of architectural styles that were more prevalent, say pre-World War II. This is something I think that actually precedes, or is actually sort of removed from many styles, and that I would typically like to see. I don't know if I'd want to codify it, but I would generally like to see relatively deep eaves and relatively steeply pitched roofs on most of the work that I'd see built. I think that you're right, that sort of strictly modern, capital M modern, or even in our postmodern, sort of the 80s, where they would strip down, any sort of overhang, any sort of rake or eave would have been stripped away in order to provide a sort of a pure geometric form. and I don't find those terribly offensive. I don't think you do either. But it is that I think that you're right, that this was probably written as a reaction to that, whether it was postmodern or modern, to get away from that particular look. However, one last thing and I'll be done. My indication to Tim Rosowski when he raised this, although I see again that Matt Hagan has had concerns about it, was what Vice Chair Boyle has just reminded me, that it's one of those, if this is going to be done, it probably should be done in this particular manner. Please, Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, I still see the other way of interpreting this. I think in response to Vice Chair Boyle, if you read all three, A, B, and C under D1, notice that C goes on to say buildings may satisfy these overhang requirements with a cornice or similar form, which to me seems to imply that it really is a requirement. They're saying instead of putting on a 6 to 30 inch eave, instead you can do it with a cornice, but in either case, one of the two is required.
Vice Chair, please.
Well, it seems if we got two different readings of this, so we need to clarify the language in which we intend. Do we intend to require an overhang in all circumstances, or is it something that's permitted but not required? And if it is, but if we are going to have one, it has to meet the three requirements.
Ms. Schmidt.
Otherwise, we're going to have a fight over what it means. Sometime down the line.
And this might be oversimplifying it, but if we changed overhang requirements to permitted overhangs, and the first two are permitted, but you can substitute the third one for these permitted or requirements if you do have overhangs. So if we wrote permitted overhangs.
But I think first we have to agree that we don't want to require eaves, correct?
Right. I'm sorry. I thought that was the direction you were going.
I'm happy with that. I'm just not sure enough others have spoken enough about how they feel on that. We would also have to change part of number C, where it says buildings may satisfy these overhang requirements with a cornice, and probably say buildings may use a cornice or similar form or something like that. Take out the mention of requirement there.
Yeah.
Vice Chair, I thought I saw your hand.
You did. I mean, I guess the question is, are we going to require that buildings have either an eave or a cornice? Because I'm not reading it that way right now. And if that's what we want, that's fine. But that's not the way I'm reading it right now.
So just to clarify, you're saying that the way you're reading it, neither an eave nor a cornice would be required.
Right, but that if we do have an overhang, it either has to satisfy it has to satisfy A or B, or A or B, depending on whether it's principal or accessory building, or it could satisfy C. But there has to be an overhang. That's the way I read it.
Commissioner Williams?
I read it the same way as Commissioner Boyle.
Okay. Any other thoughts? I'm going to call you out specifically. Commissioner Wagner, Commissioner Sullivan, or Commissioner Cahill, thoughts? If you don't, that's fine too.
But it
Cahill?
seems like we should start out with the statement that there is an overhang requirement. If that's
Unless there isn't one.
Unless there isn't one. So what are we trying to do?
I don't think we decided.
The rest of it doesn't make sense unless there is an overhang requirement.
Commissioner Wolf and then Mr. Haywood.
Yeah, I think we got to get off of this detail and decide, do we want to have an overhang or eave required or not? So we need to hear from some of the other members how they feel about it.
Mr. Haywood had his hand up, and then Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you. So, I mean, if we wanted to require it, I think we take the nod from C1 above it, and just say only the following configurations and techniques are permitted is the way to tie that up. But yes, we do have to decide, have some consensus here if that's what we want to do.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I'm fine not having a requirement, frankly.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Wagner, I know you're not obligated if you don't have an opinion, I guess, but if you would grace us with any wisdom you might be able to pass on to us. I'm sure you don't spend a lot of time.
I have no wisdom. I'm fine with no overhang requirement.
Okay. Commissioner Cahill.
What are the pros and cons of having an overhang? Why did this even get in here?
I think it comes back primarily to Commissioner Wolf's hunch or opinion that it was driven, I think, largely by the early drafts of this ordinance were trying to constrain architectural styles into something that would have been considered more traditionally styled. And that being the case, we would typically see relatively deep overhangs, or certainly expressed more than 6 inches would be really, really, really small. I generally start at 12 and go to 16 and even deeper on my own work. Again, just me. So 6 would be a suggestion of an overhang. The reality, all right, so that's one answer. The reality is again, in this climate, it's not a bad idea to get the precipitation away from the foundation of the building. And we do that with relatively steep roofs and relatively deep overhangs. I'd have a tough time selling a 30-inch overhang most of the time, but 16 is pretty easy to do, and 12 or 24 wouldn't be unheard of. So the range that's being offered, I'd say is reasonable. In terms of the cornice, again, going back to sort of stylistic issues, the way that we often think about buildings is sort of a base, then the middle part, which we often refer to as the shaft, and then some sort of cap. And so if a base, and that's a sort of a classical ordering method where we would have a sort of a different material or a different way of expressing the bottom of the building, and then a different material between the bottom and near the top, and then something at the very top, in this case, the cornice. And so again, I think that the intention in writing it so that there's going to be a cornice was just a suggestion or a suggestion to adopt this classical ordering technique of base, shaft, cap. I'm comfortable with saying that they're not required, but if they are indeed, if the owner or their design professional chooses to employ them, then I think that it would be a good idea to provide them some direction as to what would be expected, so they get sort of the best of both worlds. A 6-inch overhang is minuscule, right? So there's anybody that's sort of put off by the idea of a 6-inch overhang. I guess they just choose not to do one. So I don't think one should be required necessarily, but if they choose to do one, I think there should be some guidelines. Commissioner Wolf.
So do you have any idea why another architect, Tim in this case, or Matt as a developer owner, would object to a 6-inch overhang? My reaction was the same. A 6-inch overhang is almost invisible.
So I'd have to go back to, I don't have it right here at my fingertips, but my recollection was that there are actually two different things. I think Tim took exception to the idea of a cornice, and then I think that I can't remember specifically how he put it, but basically said that he said that very few architects put cornices on buildings anymore. And I think, again, if you think about it in terms of an Italian, sort of a heavily, an expressed Italianate cornice with brackets and dentils. And so, yeah, we wouldn't see that very often at all. In fact, just let's turn back one page so sort of I can speak with, sort of referring to examples. You can see the bottom left-hand corner. That's a pretty heavy, that's a parapet, but it's got a pretty heavy, really detailed projecting cornice. And normally, in fact, I don't even see, well, that I don't see a picture expressed here that shows, actually go 2 pages back, page 42, top left. That to me is still a cornice, but it's obviously expressed much less strongly than the one that's shown 2 pages forward. I think Tim is trying to allow for the idea that not that puts him off, but that, could you even do that without the two, the brick stepping out and the different material at the top? And it doesn't seem to me that would be out of line. That's I suspect what his, if not objection, his concern was. And then I think Matt had some concerns about, I think in his case, he was talking about a firewall, that there was some wall that has to project typically through the roof of the building. And you wouldn't want to have an overhang in the case that he was describing to me, that there's a potential place to catch fire underneath the eave, I think is the way he described it. I can't remember specifics about what the project was, which project he was talking about, but I think his was less aesthetic and more building safety. I could find out more about that if you'd like. Thanks, Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, that page 42, if you look at the top left picture, as you pointed out, the building on the left doesn't look like it has much of an overhang at all.
Right.
So I think that reinforces my view even more. And I think if you were going to change the language, you could change it to say eaves may, instead of shall, overhang up to 30 inches on the primary structure. And that's the best of both worlds, as you were describing. So yeah, eaves may overhang up to 30 inches on the primary structure. Just a thought.
Yep, they're good. Commissioner Wolf?
The way the discussion is going, I would seriously question why we're regulating them at all. I tend to agree with Mr. Sullivan, but I don't really see why to limit them to 30 inches. If someone really wants a deeper eave, is that really an issue for us? It would be much simpler if we just took this out completely.
All right, let's pursue that as an option. Any thoughts about just removing section D1 entirely?
I mean, D1B in particular is requiring at least a 4-inch overhang, which is just crazy. It just seems like that would have no visual effect at all to speak of.
Any thoughts? I'm, again, if we did try to pick away as much of the extraneous stuff as possible, and maybe this one just missed us, that, and I'm wondering now, again, I wouldn't do it that way, but that doesn't mean that others might not, and that sort of, it doesn't take away your, I'll say, freedom to put an overhang or an eave on, or a cornice if you really want to. So maybe you got this one right. Commissioner Wolf?
Can you think of a building in East Lansing that has 30-inch eaves anywhere? 2.5 feet. It's unlikely to happen. And if someone did, they would have a very specific style in mind that I would probably like, I suspect.
Now, Vice Chair Boyle's desire to build the Gamble House in Pasadena here in Michigan would fit. Vice Chair, please.
I'm going to guess the emergency physicians building would be the only one I could think of that might have an overhang that is that great. On Coolidge, is it? No.
Yeah, it's Coolidge at Abbey Road. Yeah. It's the right style for it.
Yep. I don't know if it's got 30 inches, but that would probably be the only one I could think of that might have a 30-inch overhang.
And I can't, sort of top of my, is Evans Scholars Building? That seems like it's also this sort of slightly prairie style, but
Yes, but this is even more so than the Evans Scholars Building. It is more so prairie style than the Evans Scholars Building, I would say. It's a very pretty building.
yeah, I can't picture it. I will look for it. All right, anybody that's so in love with eaves or cornices that they need to see this, yeah, okay. I'm seeing a lot of smiles and heads shaking. Ms. Schmidt, I think we've got good direction on this one.
So we're going to remove that entirely.
I believe so. With reserving the right to recall this item at a later date if, I'm kidding. Let's move on to item 10, please. To clarify the height overlay clarify whether the height overlay should continue to apply. It is not currently reflected in the code. This was an isolated comment by someone who I didn't actually recognize. I'll have to go down to go back. Go ahead, Ms. Schmidt.
For a newspaper.
Pardon?
A gentleman that works for the newspaper.
Oh, okay. Oops. So I believe we talked about this briefly last time, did we not? In fact, was it not one of the last things, Mr. Haywood? Can you help me?
Yeah, perhaps you talked about it at the last meeting. I apologize I wasn't there for the discussion, but I think it's, we just need to boil down the question. The intent is there by council, right? I mean, they established this overlay district. So I don't know that it's so much a question about the form-based code as I think we would just make the assumption that they want to continue with that until we're kind of instructed otherwise. So I think we probably just need to take the approach of how do we work it into the code and make it link up. Because I don't know right now, I don't know if we want to go down the whole rabbit hole of telling them to disregard this or eliminate this from the other part of the code. We got to stitch together what is already there.
Go ahead, Commissioner Wolf.
And as I was mistaken about this at the last meeting, but now that I've looked at it again, with the current status, if we put the Avenue Form District in place, the building height overlay district, the way I read it, would overlay that and would still allow 160-foot tall buildings in the portion, it would be in the M4 where the 140-foot is allowed. The way it's written, I believe it would still be effective. So if we do nothing, it will still be in effect.
So what was the question, was it raised because there's not a specific reference? Basically, as Mr. Haywood has said, it needs to be stitched together with what current policy is, and that it's not reflected yet, but it will be.
Right. We want to make sure that you're aware that currently it's intended to be connected, but it's not clear. I didn't want anyone to be surprised that the heights were still part of that overlay. They sent this to City Council.
All right, thank you. Any other concerns about item 10? Commissioner Wolf?
So are we concluding that it should be rewritten into the Avenue Form District rather than relying on the current language? Or do we leave it as is and believe that it's still in effect?
Mr. Haywood?
Well, I mean, if you look at page 19, the height table, there's no indication that that's a possibility.
Correct.
Right.
So somebody might not know that it's even possible and without finding it somewhere else in the code. So, I mean, to me, it would be logical to nod that, this option's available for this other section and, slip it in there like we have the maximum building height, add another line that allows them to go to 160 in the M4 with a special use permit.
So presumably some sort of footnote on page 19.
If you'd like, we can take a stab at it and bring something back.
Commissioner Wolf?
Well, if you want to duplicate the current regulation, you can't just say M4 because right now it says it's property south of Albert, north of Grand River, west of Bailey, and east of Abbott, which is not synonymous with the M4. So it would still have to be defined as that geographic overlay, which I don't know, it's going to complicate that table, but I agree with you that we don't want to really leave it exactly the way it is, where someone would not be aware of it when they looked at that height table.
Vice Chair Boyle?
Well, we can reference the existence of the overlay, height overlay, in a footnote and cite the ordinance in it. And I suppose if we really want to be inclusive of all the option, you put it in the appendix. You put the ordinance in the appendix. But then somebody who's looking at the form-based code will know that there's an option for greater height under certain circumstances, and they can check it out. I don't know that it has to go on the table, and it's problematic to put it in the table because it's not available in all of M4.
Commissioner Wolf?
It does concern me a little bit to leave it in the remainder of the code, because I think it would be unique in that respect, that it would be the only thing that applies specifically within the Avenue Form District that is not part of the Avenue Form District regulations, that exists somewhere else in the legacy code. In that sense, it would be a lot cleaner to bring it forward into the Avenue Form District.
And the areas that you just reminded us of the boundary, those are all within the boundary of the Avenue Form District. So there's really no reason that it would have to survive outside of that.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly my thinking there. That it has no applicability outside of the Avenue Form District, whereas we do have some other things that would apply both inside and outside.
Does that give you some good direction, staff?
So.
Okay. Any other comments on item 10? Right, item 11, why require a roof over a front porch? Should this requirement be eliminated? I've got some thoughts on this, but I'd be happy to hear somebody else provide some direction if they have any thoughts.
Can you tell me where that is?
I'm looking. I'm presuming I'm gonna have to go back and check. I think that the definition of front porch says that it has a nope.
So it's not in the architectural standard section, right?
No, I think it's in the
building form.
Yeah, in the chart for the residential.
Oh, okay, I found it. It's in it's under facade projections, page 16.
Oh, whoa.
Or I guess I'm losing the numbers here. I can't, where am I? 402, 402C2C. All front porches shall be completely covered by a roof. So that's the statement that we're talking about.
That's correct.
I think, again, this is very similar to the eave. The way I've interpreted it is that it's trying for the traditional look, which generally did not have uncovered porches.
Right.
And I'm certainly not wed to requiring roofs on them.
Other thoughts? Vice Chair, please.
Well, to me, a stoop is a front porch that doesn't have a roof, but perhaps I'm an error there. I do notice that the section never, although its heading is stoops and front porches, it never addresses stoops by name. So maybe it's saying that front porches may be screened, and all front porches have to be covered by a roof, but it says nothing about stoops. So stoops don't have to be covered by a roof.
Yeah, I agree. My take on this is that, it's a stoop otherwise, that in order to gain, so if the intention is to provide the sort of the comfortable urban environment, those of you that have read Jane Jacobs, or you've certainly heard people say the eyes on the street is a good way to sort of keep the peace. People are more likely to linger on their porches if they're they're protected from the elements. If they either, whether it's rain and snow or sun. It also has the additional advantage of providing some cover for the front door so that the snow doesn't build up on the porch and somebody's got a place to wait while you're getting to the front door if it's during inclement weather. It has an additional potential complication, and for our purposes on page 31, where the difference between stoops and porches is highlighted, in that the stoop is built outside the required building line, that is to say closer to the street, whereas the porch is built behind the required building line. So whether that's a deal breaker or not, I couldn't say, but that in my mind, if it doesn't have a cover on it, you're not likely to linger there. And so it's not really a porch. It's a place to gain access to the main front door of the building. And it's probably not a place you're likely to linger. Otherwise I think it's just a deck or a stoop. Commissioner Wolf.
Well, there's also a difference in size.
Yes.
Pretty importantly, a stoop is limited to a 4-foot depth and 5-foot width. So right. It's if someone wanted what would be considered a generous sized porch without a roof, it would not qualify as a stoop.
Correct.
So it would not be allowed.
Right. Right. So if they wanted a place to gather,
it's not simply a porch without a roof.
Yeah. So, but they wanted a place, if you wanted to construct a place to gather that didn't have a roof, well, that were permitted, you wouldn't call it a stoop. You'd call it a roofless porch, and you'd have to set it all behind the required building line. It just seems that this is one of those, like, I think it's a different case. It's not it's just simply aesthetic, eave or no eave, cornice or no cornice, that you're going to get a lot more use out of it if it's fairly broad and got decent cover to it. My thoughts. Any others? Commissioner Wolf.
So you're thinking it's trying to impose the roof requirement in order to make the building overall better. That's kind of a way of saying it.
I do think that the environment would be improved if the porches were in place and used.
Right.
Commissioner Sullivan.
I was going to try to send this link to the chat, but my first home actually had a very large porch that was uncovered, mostly no roof on it. So if anybody wants to see a picture of what one looks like, it was in Groesbeck.
So we were supposed to turn off the chat function. I don't know if I'm going to go away from. I am. All right, I'm going to close that. I'll take a look at that later. Thank you for sharing that. Commissioner Cahill.
I just wanted to ask Commissioner Boyle if perhaps the Book of Kells gave us any guidance at this point.
Well, I don't know. The page that it's turned to today definitely doesn't. But they'll turn the page tomorrow to a different one. So maybe.
For those who aren't Irish, that's Trinity College in Dublin behind her,
sure,
which houses the Book of Kells.
Any other thoughts about porches?
I just realized.
Oops, sorry, thank you. Any other thoughts about porches and stoops? I don't know that we've got, yeah, I'm seeing head shakes again. I'm not willing to give up on this yet, but I'm also not willing to fight too hard tonight. I'd like to hear what I don't know what the general public has to say about this. I'm taking Matt's comments to heart and Commissioner Sullivan's that, certainly the best, he and Matt said as much, that yes, if we could do a roof on it, we do. We know that it's a better space when it can be protected either from rain or snow or sun. Sometimes budget won't permit that.
So we are going to keep it for now.
That's my recommendation, but there's 6 other people in this group that may disagree. Commissioner Wolf being one potentially. Go ahead.
No, actually, I'm going to agree with that. After going through this discussion, I feel differently about the roof over the porch than about the eaves. I think it is a better one to require. I'm not 100% on that side, but that's what I would do, is leave it in for now and see if we get any other feedback.
I think we're more likely to lose the roof of the porch than we are to see the return of the cornice. So maybe there's a potential opportunity there. Any other comments about stoops and porches? All right, item number 12 then. Clarify whether the requirement for street walls should remain as is in the code, or should it be amended for their use with surface parking lots? And sort of a follow-up to that, should street walls be required at all? Ms. Schmidt, is this from you?
This is from the conversation we started to have with the Grand River parking lot that you just approved.
Right.
There was a lot of discussion about putting up an actual wall. Right now, we've got you will probably be seeing another site plan for a temporary parking lot that will have to be landscaped and whatnot. Are these things that we want to have flexibility on, or do we actually want them to build a wall around parking lot that will probably be there for 5 or 6 years?
Right.
And maybe we do, but it's something to think about.
So your clarification helped, that this is raised regarding the idea that anything that's built at the required building line that's not building would the expectation would be that there would be a street wall built to go from property line to property line, sort of side property line to side property line, but that access to parking at the rear, which in an ideal world, when this is fully built out, would come through an alley. And so the access to the rear of the lot would, by definition, have to go past it. And, before the alley is constructed, that would have to go past the building like it does now, like it does more often than not now, right? A curb cut and then a driveway and so on. I think that if this, whatever the solution is, there's some discussion is going to have to happen on this particular issue until the alley issue is resolved. I've got a long-term potential solution that will not meet with great agreement amongst this group, and that it seems to me that if we keep the street wall in place and then expand on street parking overnight, that might be a potential solution. And I know that that's going to be a tough sell, but that's something I feel pretty strongly about. It's not the answer that it's not a discussion for this evening, but it is a potential solution. Other thoughts about this one? Is it something potentially where the requirement for the street wall could be lifted until the alley is built?
That's a consideration as well. We do have, as you know, the urban guidelines will stay in place for the areas within the DDA.
Right.
So those currently require the type of fence that was shown in the 270 Grand River Avenue. We would have to change that, which of course we can. But right now it conflicts with that. And is that something I know we've gone a long way to try to eliminate parking areas in these situations. But we've also had buildings torn down for development that is being held off on during these economic times. So it might be better to have a parking lot like we're looking at for 270 Grand River than have a vacant building sitting there so that people can park there, is what I'm thinking. Because once the building goes down, it's considered a parking lot and you have to go through a process.
Commissioner Wolf.
So to resolve this, would it be enough to expand the definition or maybe the name of a street wall to include a fence with certain specifications?
That's what I'm thinking.
The idea is it would be much less expensive to put in certain kinds of fences and also less permanent than to put in a stone wall or a brick wall that's 4 feet or 5 feet or whatever tall. Is that more or less the issue?
Yes.
So at a minimum, we would still be requiring it to be enclosed.
Right, but not at the street wall.
Not with a wall, you mean, or not?
No, not, I'm sorry, not at the build to line.
Where would it be then?
For instance, if you're looking at 270 Grand River.
Mm-hmm. What would be different?
It is the build line, isn't it? So I guess it would.
It's certainly close.
Yes.
Right. I would be in favor of some flexibility of allowing a fence instead of the type of walls that are included or required right now. I can see why they want to have a substantial looking wall to make it look as though you have a somewhat continuous facade defining the streetscape. But I think a nice looking fence can do a pretty good job of it anyway, even if there are cars behind it and you can see it. A fence, and certainly if there's some landscaping, some bushes behind that, could do a pretty good job as a substitute. So I would be in favor of some flexibility there.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Commissioner Cahill?
I was just going to say, I prefer to see fences with the, what were you calling it, Darcy? Aluminum?
Aluminum.
Yeah, with like brick pillars or something rather than a wall. And to the extent we have those around, it also serves to tell people, here's some parking for you.
So staff will propose some changes and bring it to you to review and approve.
I just want to clarify that, because this is something that Commissioner Wolf had brought up last meeting, that, and appreciating what you've just said, Ms. Schmidt, about the temporary nature of parking lots, that the proposal that we recommended approval of this evening actually wouldn't fit with our current guidelines, because but that we're really talking about, I think we're actually talking about two different conditions here. One where we've got a parking lot as the primary use, right? As in 270 Grand River. The second one being where the parking is I don't know, even you'd call it an accessory use. It's just a use. It's just a storage of of vehicles on the lot. I don't think that, maybe it does. Does it qualify as an accessory use or not? But basically, we need to provide a path for the vehicle to get to the rear lot. So requiring a street wall would be inappropriate. But something, a slightly different material, some sort of fence, would be entirely appropriate, and that it continues to establish that line, but also can be removed or opened in order to provide access. So I think that it seems to me that there's two different issues here. I think you've got the gist of both of them, but that it's not just a matter of saying the standards that would apply for a primary use parking lot are the same that we're dealing at with this sort of secondary use on a of parking on a site. Yes?
Yes.
Did I see a hand while I was, Mr. Commissioner Wagner? No? Okay. All right. Item, if we're done with parking and the alley issue, I think it remains an issue, sort of how we're going to deal with that. So we'll move on from this, but I think that ultimately needs to be brought back before us. Item 13, add language to part 6 that makes it clear that the parapet is not included in the building height. I thought that was pretty clear in the graphic, actually. I think Mr. Marzowski brought this one up, but on page, it's clear to me, but I also don't have a problem with calling it out verbally. But on page 19, the building height, the maximum story height in this case is called out at, or maybe that's the difference, but the maximum story height is pretty clearly indicated by A, and that the parapet or cornice is above that line. I don't take objection to calling it out specifically, but it seems to me that it's clear. Thoughts? Yeah, it seems like a minor issue. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, it's probably better to make it explicit if we can find a place that seems like the right spot to do it.
I mean, maybe it's just a note on that graphic that please note the cornice is above the, line A, whatever.
Our table is getting pretty full of notes and footnotes and stuff. That concerns me a little bit.
If we brought back the idea of requiring cornices, we could specifically say there that the cornice doesn't count in the building height. All right, I'll leave that. Item 14, limiting the bedroom counts to 3. I don't remember who this came from, but limiting the bedroom counts to 3 bedrooms limits redevelopment in some areas of the city, such as the current East Village area. Consider removing some areas of East Village from this requirement. I don't recall who. I made notes where I could about who made the comment, though it doesn't really matter. I don't remember, but I don't remember who made this comment. It might be Mr. Hagan. Commissioner Wolf?
Remind me, we don't actually, this is in part 8, the use section. Is that where it comes in?
I believe so.
I was trying to remember where we actually refer to bedrooms. That must be where it is.
Yeah, we definitely do there. I'm scrolling down to find it now. I think it's picked up in a footnote, perhaps.
In the use section?
That's
yes.
So it's 803B6. At least that's one reference to 3 or fewer bedrooms.
And I believe that, and I'll have to clarify for you, but I believe that is linked to a mixed use building with a special use permit, but I'll have to clarify that. We now require that both in East Village and the B3 district when they're mixed use.
I don't know that, again, that this is the night to solve this particular issue, but it seems to me that this item has come up often enough that it probably is something that should be discussed at some further length. I know that it was part of the Mr. Pearson's initial draft of the most recent rewrite of the East Village ordinance, and that it was given consideration by staff and this commission, but I think at the time we were looking to do much more, I'll say, simpler changes, sort of more accommodatable, less controversial changes. But that when the recommendation was made at that time, it seemed to me that it seemed not an unreasonable thing to at least talk about. But I think again that the timing was incorrect. It is one of those things where that when we were working on drafting this language, it seemed to me that if we're going to focus on form, which is the entire intention here, that if indeed, as Ms. Drager likes to say, that it was entirely agnostic regarding use, are some of these uses that are currently not permitted going to be permitted? That, you know, if the form meets the regulations that are established, why not a 4-bedroom apartment? And I think, in fact, now that I'm talking through this, I do think that this is a discussion that I had with Matt, because I think that what, if memory serves, and this was several years ago, what the discussion that triggered that, or the project that triggered that reduction, was the project that they've done on Albert near Bailey, the multi-unit building that did it have 7 bedrooms in it? Yeah. And that was found to be objectionable enough that I could be wrong, but that's my recollection. Ms. Schmidt?
Yeah, I think too, one of the things that is confusing people is the 3-bedroom limitation is only currently in the B3 and the East Village. For political reasons, if removing that entirely is a problem, a consideration to look at East Village changing the zoning as you go further east to one of the residential, higher density residential uses may be something we need to look at. That seems to be one of the biggest discussion pieces or considerations that I've heard from property owners in the East Village is we don't plan on building a 10-story multifamily building. We're looking at rebuilding, you know, something much more subtle. So maybe we look at changing that so that it's not all under the M4. Because the other areas would not be in the 3-bedroom that are outside of the M4 and M3, or M4, M3, and M2, I think.
Sure. So I'm certainly I'm familiar with the East Village. I can't remember the other. What did you say? B3 was the other place?
B3.
Okay. And in those areas, the 4 bedrooms are not permitted.
They're not permitted. Other areas they are.
And you're suggesting that the reason that that's not permitted is because it's a hot potato politically?
Yes. Originally, the B3 language was added by Mayor Meadows because of the new development and the student development in the downtown. And they wanted it to be more diversified and not just be built for strictly students. And when you have 4, 5, and 6 bedrooms in a unit, it's going to stay that way for students. So that was the intent, to encourage housing that filled a broader demographic group. And that was how, I think the first one was Carlson Crohn's building across from the museum.
Mm-hmm.
And they were proposing more, and then they were forced to lower the bedroom counts, right?
Right.
Thanks for that. Commissioner Wolf, please.
Now that we're talking about this, I think I see a problem in the Avenue Code in regards to this. You pointed out the 803B6, where it talks about the 3 or fewer bedrooms. All of the items in 803 are supposed to be there as conditions on the tables that precede it. 803B6 is never referred to. I just did a couple of searches through the document, there's no part of that table, as far as I can find, that actually refers to it. I would expect it to have been near the top of table 802.1 for the mixed use districts.
We'll take a look at that.
So I think it doesn't have any effect right now.
Actually, I wonder if that wouldn't be a bad idea, since you said that, Ms. Schmidt, that to, in as much as we've made sure that we go from the additional regulations to a reference, that those references have some anchor back in the table. Otherwise, as Commissioner Wolf was saying, it's sort of, it's just there on, you know, connected, disconnected. Again, I know we're not going to solve this particular issue tonight. I know that it is I didn't realize it was quite so hot politically, but I wonder if, say that the 25% rule attempts to address the same concerns in terms of student housing that this reduction of bedrooms does. And again, it's not going to be solved this evening. When Mr. Pearson had brought it up, in fact, I think his anecdote suggested that 1 and 2 bedrooms sell really well, that 3 bedrooms are tricky because the 2 students, they team up and there's tend to be 2 against 1, and they don't rent a second year very as frequently as the other ones do, because there's sort of a you know, 2 people can get along or they don't. 1 person clearly presumably gets along with themselves, but the 3 bedrooms are an odd mix that tends to be a 2 on 1, 2 against 1, and that they don't often renew, or they don't renew as often. I appreciate that that's not something that's going to be solved by this particular the language here, but I don't know. I guess I'm open to the idea that that's something that we should be thinking about.
And what was political years ago may not be so now.
Right. Or as I say, maybe it's something where some additional restrictions that have been put in place address the same issue. I mean, again, I don't know if that's what drove former Mayor Meadows to make that that change, but my recollection was it was indeed that 7-bedroom unit on Albert and Bailey that just just caused a collective aneurysm to people that were concerned that that was just going to be a nightmare. And then they built another, sorry, Mr. Schmidt, then they built another one right next door, which might actually have fewer bedrooms. I think they may have reorganized things to meet, but I live right down the block from there, and I don't know that that's any better or any worse than any other building.
Yeah, and that came about because when the first one was built, our language allowed us staff to approve that administratively.
Right.
So the change, it wasn't so much that 7 units or having 7 units in one house was bad. It was that it didn't require public input. And so we changed that.
Okay. And I actually don't know what zone that's in. That's okay. It's fine. It's not B3 though.
No.
Okay. Commissioner Wolf.
There is something else different about that, as I remember. Isn't that a Class B multiple family rather than Class A, which is by far the more common type we have?
Okay. I'm not sure that we addressed that, except to say that sort of we acknowledge limiting the 3-bedroom counts. Consider removing some of them. So it sounds like you're.
But need more consideration under it for your conclusion?
Seems to me, I don't know how I'm one person, again, 1 of 7 tonight. Commissioner Cahill.
Yeah, I had always wondered what the concern was about the multiple bedrooms. And Darcy gave a good explanation tonight for the thinking that went into that. My recollection was there was some concern about too many students being gathered together also at the time. Is that right, or was that
I don't know that they were concerned with the 4 bedrooms. I think it was more of
7.
They're designed as a 4-bedroom, 4-bath. It likely will never be utilized by anyone ever other than students.
Okay.
which that can always be reconfigured in the future. So that's not really a strong argument.
Right.
So everyone has their own bath in those apartments?
Typically.
Things have changed since I was in college.
Thank you all. Oh, sorry, Commissioner, Vice Chair Boyle, sorry.
Yes, my recollection with what I would call the townhouses, the multi-bedroom townhouses, at least one council member to me expressed concern that they wanted more density downtown, but they didn't want it configured like these townhouses. They wanted apartment buildings, and the 6-bedroom or 7-bedroom townhouses were a good financial go for the landlord. So in effect, they were building something, and that wasn't in the picture of the particular council member I was talking to, who was not Mark Meadows, for increasing the density downtown. So neither here nor there, but that's my recollection of some of the objections. Regarding the East Village, I have heard from other property owners in the East Village that with the limit on the number of bedrooms, then they're not going to redevelop because they can't make enough money to pay back on the cost of building a new building if they're limited to 3 bedrooms or 2 bedrooms. So I think that's a concern. 3 students don't want to rent together. I'm not quite persuaded by that. As a student, I rented with 2 other roommates a couple of times, so I don't remember that it was problematic, but perhaps that's the particular landlord's view of what's happening.
Sure.
It's cheaper to build 1 kitchen for 4 bedrooms.
Yes, indeed.
Particularly if you're going to put granite countertops in the kitchen, so.
Right. Commissioner Cahill.
I'm not that concerned that it would be for students in some of these buildings, because the reality is we're next to a university, and the large majority of the housing is going to be student housing. And I think if someone is going to build for adults, older adults, they're going to build a building for that purpose. And these buildings just fill the need for student housing, I think. And like I say, when I was in college, everyone was in 2 bedrooms, but you had a roommate, and so there were 4 people in every apartment anyway. So I'd be in favor of at least going up to 4.
Yeah. As I say, I think that this is something that probably would benefit from some discussion. That it did come up at the most recent consideration of the redraft of the East Village, and I think it was handled appropriately there. That those changes were needed to happen a little bit more quickly than sort of rushing through the 4-bedroom would have been appropriate to do at that time. And maybe it's not appropriate at all, but I do think it would merit some discussion. It would benefit from some discussion. That brings us to the end of the, well, I'm sort of going from our list from 2 weeks ago. That brings us to the end of those items that Ms. Schmidt had flagged as topics that may require less discussion prior to the vote of the Planning Commission to add, or modify the code. This meeting, we've got some additional items that follow, starting with, I'm going to today's document, page 3 of 104 or page 116 of 217. It's item 15, the statement on page 7F1. It explains how to get an exception from the architectural standards. So starting there, or continuing with the list from the last meeting that actually starts to get into what Ms. Schmidt is calling topic that must be added to the requirements of the Avenue Forum District through changes to the current code. I'm mindful that it's 5 minutes to 9, and if you'd rather just stop, that's fine too. I'm going to clip Yeah, because I think this is great, this list you provided, because not only does it, you've added the red text to provide some clarification about the things you've already talked about, but it's a good summary of the things we've got about, we're on to item 15 of, well over 40, but we're making our way through this. So that's a good start. Again, hoping to, or looking for some guidance as to what the pleasure of the commission is in proceeding tonight. Commissioner Wolf, thank you.
Well, I'll speak up. I'm willing to continue for a while. Stopping is okay too, but I'm willing to continue. And I also want to just comment on the document. I really like the way Darcy laid this out here. It really summarizes the issues well and has us organized as to what we need to do. It was a very good addition here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely agreed. Sorry, I'm looking for the page that's referred in this. I'm also happy to hear other thoughts about how you all would like to proceed.
Well, if we're going to continue, I'd like a quick break for about 5 minutes.
That's fine. Any objections to that? All right, let's take a break for 5 minutes and then we'll start back. Maybe I'll find the reference before we talk. Well, let's start on item 15 on from today's, because the items that the one that I'm suggesting we start with has actually been inserted at the end of the list of things that Ms. Schmidt, I think, comfortably thinks we can handle without a great deal of discussion. So 15 at the bottom of page, again, it's either 3 or 116. We'll see you all in 5 minutes. I think we're all back. David's not here. Or he's here and he's got his camera off, and Darcy stepped. There we go. All right, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Let's proceed with item 15. I've found the reference, and in fact, I probably ought to, when I see Matt next, I'll thank him for annotating these. Unless, did you do those, Ms. Schmidt? He's got questions specifically referring to pages, so makes it easy for us to find them. The first one is, I think it's more of an administrative type question, but item 15, the statement on page 7, F1, it explains how to get an exception from the architectural standards of part 6. How is this evaluated? And I will have to read the part underneath that to see if that provides any guidance. I mean, it does offer criteria below. It's, yeah, I know. Like it says. I mean, I actually think that Mr. Mrozowski Tim brought up a similar type question about the design of the building shall be in keeping with the architectural character of downtown East Lansing, which, I don't know, it seems to me is probably eclectic enough that there's no real strong, does it have to be brick? Does it have to be wood? Does it have to be modern or traditional? Perhaps this is entirely unsatisfactory sort of answer, but is it something you almost have to see it to it want to be vague enough so as to not prevent somebody from asking, but to try to spell it out. I wonder what it would be exactly that doesn't meet the forms that are the I'll say stripped down architectural standards that we've established. I see everybody's muted except for Commissioner Cahill. So just, if you want to say something, feel free. Ms. Schmidt.
Great, I can just talk away.
That's just me and you. I don't know. Are we comfortable? Go ahead, Commissioner Wolf.
I'm not sure exactly what he's looking for. I guess he wants more specific guidelines about what the Planning Commission should discuss if such an application for an exception comes up, or
That's my sense. Again, he and I did discuss this at some length, and well, actually, we discussed all these things at some length, not necessarily this question. So I mean, I wonder if, you know, he can read as well, and in fact did, obviously read the whole thing, but that the criteria are spelled out. It's just, I wonder if you, as you say, Commissioner Wolf, it's sort of is it something where there'll be some sort of formal appeal, and by which the standards are reconsidered or are considered to be expanded? How about?
Well, is it going to require a public hearing?
It seems to me it probably should. I don't know.
I mean, I would think, but that would be the question that I would thought he was asking.
I see.
You know, is it going to be a procedure similar to getting a special use permit that requires a public hearing?
Right.
I mean, it's given us standards to consider, the Planning Commission standards to consider in making its determination. So
And I mean,
I'm not quite sure what he means by how is this evaluated.
Sure. Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, now that we're getting into that, it does seem as though this should be covered in the table up above or somewhere, because nowhere, it does say it shall be reviewed by the Planning Commission. But does that mean the Planning Commission makes the final decision, or do we make a recommendation? I think it should be clear. What was that?
It's a good question. I don't think it is clear. I think that was a good point.
All right. Commissioner, Mr. Haywood?
My sense is that if someone was going to be asking for an exception to their architectural standards, it would be part of the review process. I mean, they're going to bring a site plan and elevations and everything. I mean, it's already going to be in front of the Planning Commission, likely with a public hearing, you know, and all of that. Everything else that you're making decisions on are a recommendation to council. This would be also.
Sure.
Good point, Dave.
Commissioner Wolf?
Well, I'm not so sure that's the case, because if you look at the table up above, they could come in with say a minor expansion of the building area, which can be administratively approved. Now, if that minor expansion came in asking for architectural exceptions, or is a minor expansion already exempt from the architectural standards? Maybe I'm
Actually, look 2 lines down. That it specifically addresses modification to architectural elements or standards. Maybe that's what he's getting at.
Oh, yes. Okay, that's what I was looking for. I couldn't find it.
And that stops at the Planning Commission.
Right.
Or potentially stops at the Planning Commission.
All right, perfect. I thought it was missing from up there.
Ms. Schmidt, what's the intention in terms of, I mean, we're talking about them here and you're creating a document. Are you likely to just copy everybody that's written? I mean, I presume this is a specific letter to Mr. Mrzowski and Mr. Hagan and Dr. Drager and so on. You know, basically a response saying, here's all your questions. Here's the questions that everybody asked, and here are the responses to everybody.
Yeah, the last meeting, I emailed the link to the packet to everyone that responded. This week, I don't believe I did that. I think I just had Rebecca send the link to the meeting to make sure they all remembered that it was coming up today. So maybe that's what we'll do, just make sure that they get a copy of this every meeting as it's updated. So I think that's a good idea.
And then eventually their topic will be covered as well. Are we comfortable with where we stand on this, on item 15? Commissioner Cahill?
It seems to me we've got kind of a confusing situation there, where E's talking about bonuses requiring city council approval. And then when we go to F, it looks like it just comes to us. It doesn't go to city council. And I would think that it would just be part of the regular site plan process. It would go to both. We would recommend approval or denial, and then it would go to city council.
Right, so that's because that parallels what we're doing now. That's our current process.
Right, by saying exceptions requiring planning commission approval, it makes it seem like it's not part of the regular site plan process. It's that we have like complete control over it in the planning commission.
Well, that's potentially one of the changes that could come about as a result of this, in this particular portion of the ordinance, that there would be some, and I saw your hand, Mr. Haywood, for just a sec, that there would be potentially some items that would, again, council, we've said this, that council is going to ultimately have to grant that authority to the planning commission if that's the intention, but that there would be some things that potentially wouldn't see council as they do now. It wouldn't be a recommendation to council. It would be a approval by the planning commission. Mr. Haywood, was there something else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I guess after reading it again, I would agree that it's making it sound like the planning commission would have the final authority on this matter.
That's fair.
So, and I'm guessing this is by design because we're trying to make things, less regulatory, lessen the number of hoops to jump through. But it is a little, we do go back and forth on a lot of things, but yeah, rereading it, I think it stops at the planning commission.
Commissioner Cahill. Oh, and then
Yeah.
Commissioner Wolf. Yep.
I think we are making it easier for them because a lot of this, certain things can just go to the staff for approval. But when we get to talking about exceptions, that could be a pretty wide range of things. And I would think city council would be perhaps getting asked about something that, how could this be that when the rules are such and this is done differently? I would think council would want to approve those type of things.
Commissioner Wolf had his hand up, then Mr. Haywood.
Well, first I would say in response to that, these are only architectural standards. They're not, the big issues about the use of the building and traffic and, the major issues. So I think it's appropriate to have that decided by the planning commission. But what I was going to point out is it would occasionally cause a kind of unusual situation. Looking at that table, if you had a new development that qualified under the second or third rows of the table, if it's requiring incentives or going over 4 stories, and they also wanted to modify the architectural elements, then the architectural part of the request would reach a final decision at the planning commission, and then the remainder of the project would be forwarded to council with a recommendation. It would be a little peculiar. I'm not saying it's not workable, but might be a little hard for people to understand or
Mr. Haywood, and then Commissioner Cahill.
Yeah, on that note, where the awkwardness I think might come into play is where the planning commission grants a waiver in a certain way that the council doesn't like. And would have been where we had when it gets there. They don't like it. They don't want to approve the project because of the waiver that was granted. It can really create some tension in that regard. Not that that's going to happen all the time, but it could.
Commissioner Cahill, then Vice Chair Boyle.
Yeah, what Dave said is pretty much what I was saying before. That I think council would not be too happy if we granted an exception that was significant, and they never were able to weigh in on it. And what we're talking about are exceptions. It could be an exception to the entire architectural standards, I suppose. It's not limited, like where we're talking about staff approval for 20% or less or whatever. So it could be major exceptions to something, and we'd be making the decision, and council would be completely without power in that regard. And I think if I were on council, I'd be pretty unhappy when voters are saying, how the heck did this happen? When the standards say it's supposed to be such and such and such and such. And they say, well, it's not our power, it's planning commission power. I think people would think that was pretty insane.
Vice Chair Boyle, then Mr. Sullivan, Commissioner Sullivan, and Commissioner Wolf.
All right, just procedurally on how we're sending this on to council and looking at the goal to try and make the review process simpler and more efficient, I would propose we leave it the way it is, because that does give a possibility for someone to get an architectural exemption from the Planning Commission. Now, if they get one and they still need a special use permit because it fits in one of the categories that require council review, I'm going to bet you if council really doesn't like the architectural standards, they're going to get changed before the special use permit gets approved. I mean, in the past, there've been, when there were no architectural standards or no facade standards, things got changed along the way as part of the review process. So I don't really think it's going to put council in an uncomfortable position, because I don't think that's going to happen. But maybe more basic than that is, we want to send this to council in a way that supports making it more efficient and less review for projects. If when it gets to council, they see this and they want to make the architectural standards subject to their review, they can add that on. But for me as a planning commission member working on the Avenue Form District Code, I'm not going to add that in. I'm going to leave it the way it is.
I saw Commissioner Sullivan, Commissioner Wolf, and Mr. Haywood.
Yeah, to piggyback off of Vice Chair Boyle's comments, we're essentially sending this process to council for them to review. So if they did object to anything, they'd essentially be objecting to a process that they agreed to, which I think is the point that you were trying to make. Additionally, I don't know if there's any legal way for council to kick any of these that wouldn't require their approval before them to require their approval. However, you could add language in here that says any of these items could be subject to city council review upon majority vote. But that's a whole nother can of worms.
Commissioner Wolf.
Yeah, this seems unusual to us because we're used to the status quo where virtually every approval goes to city council. But there are municipalities all over the country where planning commissions have more power. They have final decision-making authority in many different areas. It's really not that unusual. And that is the way we are moving in order to streamline the process. So I don't have any problem with doing this at all. In particular on the architectural standards, I think it's the right way to go.
Mr. Haywood, and then Commissioner Cahill.
Well, I guess if we really think that council's going to lean on the applicant and get what they want anyway, then the can should be kicked to them. I mean, if we really think that's going to happen, which I think there's an argument that could be made that they would say, well, we'd like to see this, and they get the hint and that kind of thing, and they work it out that way. If that's really going to happen, then it really ought to be their jurisdiction. Then it can be a recommendation from us, and then they can weigh the options, and it'll all be analyzed at that point, and they can make a decision on that. The other way I think to slice this is to say that that it may be approved by the body with jurisdiction to make the final approval. That way, if it's administrative, the planning commission can make it. If it, you know, if it's a council required action to approve the overall plan, then council can make that decision. So it gives some, it's like a two-way door through that.
Commissioner Cahill, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I liked what Commissioner Sullivan said there. And I think if there was a sort of a, I don't know, relief valve or whatever, where council could say, our decision is final unless council issues some order to bring it before the council. So that they could look, they can see what's going on, see what was approved, and maybe have 7 days or something to request that it be brought before council. That's what you were suggesting, something like that, I think, weren't you, Joe?
All right, stuck on mute. Yeah, essentially some sort of process. I mean, maybe a majority vote discharges any of these, like you suggested, a 7-day window or something along those lines. Yeah, I don't know, just some method that they can bring an object before them. If maybe a news story hits and there's a new controversy and they're getting political pressure from the community, that they do have the ability to bring an item before them. Just a thought.
All right, any final, Commissioner Williams?
I'm recalling an extended conversation very similar to this when we were wrestling with this table in committee. And I think, as I recall, and I don't know if we were focusing on particularly the architectural standards, but we might have been, because I think we anticipated that there might be some consternation from council about having the endpoint here be the planning commission. But if we're really going to advance a form-based code, the trade-off for form-based standards is a streamlined process. And if I'm recalling our conversation in committee, and my reaction to this conversation this evening is the same as it was then, I prefer to leave it this way and advance it to council this way, understanding that they may very well want to change this, and that's okay. But my preference is that we leave it here.
That's my recollection as well. In fact, I think we were joined at least one time in a meeting by Mayor Pro Tem Gregg, who is our liaison, who kind of, my recollection was she sort of challenged us to ask for, to recommend that council, grant these powers and even more, sort of lean more toward granting more powers to the planning commission and have council withdraw those things they were uncomfortable with, rather than saying, how about this, and sort of a wishy-washy. I mean, there's nothing to stop council from saying, no, that's overstepping the line. But the more streamlining that can be done by reducing the number of reviews, the better. And again, I agree with you, Commissioner Williams. That's my recollection as well, that we were talking about keeping things streamlined. And I'm a similar mind. I'm still of the same mind now. Any final thoughts on item 15? It only took us a half an hour or 25 minutes. That said, Ms. Schmidt.
That said, I'm kind of hearing two things. I'm hearing leave it exactly how it is. And then I heard a couple mention the majority of vote to reverse the planning commission's decision. Where are we with that?
Vice Chair Boyle, please. And then Commissioner Cahill. Yep.
I'm with leave it the way it is.
Okay. That's as much in lieu of taking a vote. Commissioner Cahill?
I still feel council should have some ability to call something in front of them. And I think it would still be streamlined in 95% of the things that come in front of us. But on some major project, if we're granting some major exception, it seems like council should have the ability to consider it themselves. I think it would still be streamlined. Like I said, 95% of the things, I don't think council would get involved. They'd just let it go.
Commissioner Sullivan, I saw your hand as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I'm fine leaving it the way it is. However, because council ultimately has to review and approve this process, and then if there are any complaints that arise, they're essentially complaints with the process that they approved. However, I also wanted to clarify, I wasn't saying that like this would give council the ability to disprove a process. It could, if they had language in there that a majority vote discharged an issue to council, they could review it and have the discussion to approve or disprove, essentially.
I'm going to suggest that that sounds like primarily leave it in and have council.
Yes, and then revisit it if council brings it up.
There you go. All right. Item 16. Mr. Haywood.
Sorry, just a quick reminder to people that, this goes along a little bit with what Commissioner Williams said, that, we need to get this as close as we can get it, give it to council. They're going to provide a lot of feedback on this stuff, and it's going to come back to us in an ordinance form in a public hearing, and we're going to have another crack at it. So, this is a circular thing, and the boomerang is going to come back with some marks in it. So we'll have that opportunity at that point. So we do need to come to a resolution on each one of these items if we can.
All right. I'm going to put it out there again. Do we want to keep going on, or are we good at 9:30? Mr. Haywood is jogging in place.
I'm okay continuing.
Running home or staying at the meeting.
All right, let's press on for another half an hour.
I propose we finish the page.
We could try to do that. I'm sorry, I'm looking at a different page because I've reorganized the, oh nuts. What is the last number on the page you're looking at, Commissioner Sullivan?
I just see items 16 and 17 outstanding on this page.
All right, so then that's all right, because I've rewritten it so I can write notes. So all right, let's do 16 and 17 and reconsider. At item 16, there should not be a limit on the depth of awning as stated on page 16 2A. And this was Matt and I discussed this a bit. And I'm fully sympathetic to what his concerns were, that sometimes awnings are put in place to shield light, sort of shield the sun from getting in the building. Sometimes they're put up for decoration. Sometimes they're put up for to keep water off the storefront, or the sort of the I don't know, the front glass of the storefront. My thinking was that this actually comes back to what, and actually maybe this kind of goes in with the, I'm not going to revisit cornices, but cornices and or porches, that I think this kind of relies on I'll say an architectural rule of thumb by which if an awning is not of a particular depth, and I think that the consultant's recommendation of 5 feet is fine, but 6 would work, 4 might work, that you're not going to gain the benefit of that for which awnings were originally intended. Yes, they provide potential advertising and sort of a splash of color, but they also keep the sun off the storefront. Oftentimes they're retractable so that when you want to have more light in, you can pull them out of the way. But for me, as I walk along Grand River on rainy days, I do appreciate those portions of the block that have slightly deeper awnings. In fact, I did it. I don't know, maybe, the last time it rained some time ago, and I recall as I got in front of the student bookstore, the depths of the awnings change as you walk from west to east or from east to west, and that there were times when it was easy to find shelter from the rain, and sometimes it wasn't quite so easy, all along the same storefront. So I think 5 feet is appropriate. I'm sympathetic to Mr. Hagan's concern that, maybe they weren't put in place to keep the water off poor Danny walking along Grand River, but I'd like to see some standard established there. But I'm not so wedded to it that I think it's, absolutely has to stay. Commissioner Wolf.
So it is the minimum he was concerned about? Because the way the question's written, that was not clear to me. There should not be a limit on the depth of an awning. He means a lower limit?
Right.
Okay.
2A. Yeah, so he was basically saying, you know, what again, I'll name another, like at the awning in front of Lou and Harry's actually is kind of what they call a waterfall awning, and there's no way it extends more than say 3 feet from the front of the building. And
they really just use it to put their name on there.
Exactly.
Right?
So that their intention was not to provide shade for the, you know, to keep the sun off the storefront, or to, you know, to allow the low winter sun in and keep the high summer sun out, or anything like that, or to provide shelter for, you know, somebody happened to be walking along the street. Indeed, it is a place for their the name of their business and the colors of their business.
The required building line along Grand River is something like 5 feet behind the property line. Is that right?
I think that's correct.
So a minimum 5-foot awning would not even reach out to the public sidewalk. It really wouldn't help someone who was walking along the sidewalk stay out of the rain. You'd have to be walking along in the dooryards of the buildings rather than on the sidewalk.
Potentially, yes. Commissioner Sullivan.
I don't have a strong opinion on this either way, but it could provide shelter to people that are waiting to get into a business, which is very similar to the porch awning discussion we had earlier.
I do think there's a certain amount of this that harkens back to the, you know, canvas awning that stuck out and provided a signboard and shelter for, again, and by and large, it would be on south-facing you know, shops that the high summer sun would be blocked and the low summer sun would be let in and provide light deeper into the store, into the storefront. Again, it's not one I feel that strongly about, but that would I would personally prefer to see it, but it doesn't kill me if it got removed. I guess that for the time being, and maybe sort of using this as a refrain, to leave it in place and see if when it gets passed on to, thank you, Commissioner Williams, council and the public at large, if there were, you know, great exception taken, because we're almost certainly going to get feedback from every, you know, property owner along Grand River to see what their thoughts are. Any great objection to that? All right, then item 17 on page 28. Oh, the paragraph as I read it, this is Matt again, indicates you could have doors every 18 feet if you were doing row townhomes, for example. Why 18 feet? Our Albert and Duran townhome buildings are only 17 feet wide and they work. And my recollection when we discussed this was that it seemed to me, I mean, it's a number, right? 17 or 18, either of those are work, but the intention was that there wouldn't be that they wouldn't be separated by a great distance, that they would be quite, you know, relatively close together. And that I suspect that the person that drafted this figured about 18 feet would be about the right width for a typical townhome. You sort of, you know, if you walk in at the door and there's a hallway that leads to a staircase, the hallway's 3 feet wide and allow for the thickness of the walls, then that allows for about 14 feet for whatever room is remaining between the hallway and the next unit over. I guess I don't know if 17 works, then that seems to me that that's workable as well. I think where it's shown here on page 28, it's shown more as an example rather than a requirement, as you know, as a sort of a standard. But I'm going to have to ask Commissioner Wolf or Commissioner Williams, do you recall, or anybody else that's read it as thoroughly as the two of them have, do you recall a place that suggests that, 17 doesn't work, but 18 does? Commissioner Wolf?
Yeah, it's on
There we go.
page 30 in the table for placement.
Yeah.
It's the minimum townhouse width is 18 feet.
All right. And again, in that case, it sounds like they've found a way to make it work at 17 feet. I don't presume to say that there's any universal standard for townhouse, what works and what doesn't. Clearly 10 wouldn't work, right? So it's somewhere between, I'll say 10 and 18 or 10 and 24 is the ideal number. Commissioner Wolf?
In counterpoint, I would say that there are a number of semi-famous buildings in various metropolitan areas where you can find pictures on the web where a 10-foot or maybe even a 9-foot wide building exists between a couple of others.
Deliberately thin, right? Is sort of a,
right.
Yeah. Fair enough. Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, I just pulled up some photos for the townhomes that are in Old Town, and those doorways sometimes look like they're maybe even like 8 to 10 feet apart. And I think that building is beautiful.
Right. And in that case, do you think that, there's no way of knowing, I suppose, that maybe the hallway goes past one unit, opens directly into one unit, but then the one next to it goes past it to a unit and back? 8 sounds
Good
really.
point. I'm not sure. I know that the unit numbers are at the top of the doorways.
Right. Deferring to Commissioner Wolf's knowledge of the sort of the experimentally thin buildings, that starts to get pretty tight. I don't know that anybody's wedded to 18 feet, but Mr. Haywood.
Well, I'm not sure how to read this because it says the building form standard has regular street space entrances as frequently as 18 feet.
Right.
It doesn't really come off as it shall be 18, no more, no less, or more than, or equal to, or greater. I don't get the sense that that's the intent.
Sorry, Ms. Schmidt. I agree with that, and particularly where it's found in this particular, I think this is basically putting out as an example. That's why I asked about the table, Ms. Schmidt.
Yeah, the table would have to be changed because it does specifically say 18 feet minimum townhouse width.
Yeah, I think the part that he's quoted on page 28 is more anecdotal, right? It's sort of telling a story about how, yes, they'd be quite close together, as close as 18 feet even, whereas, you might imagine that they would be potentially further apart than that.
Right. I mean, the entrances could be on, for all we care, on either side of the 18 feet. So you could have, two doors that are smashed right next to each other, and
right.
The doors that are as far apart as 16 feet or so.
Sure.
I don't know why we have to even have that in there as frequently as 18 feet. That might throw people off.
You're talking about the descriptive text, not the table.
Play out in the design.
Sorry, you're talking about the descriptive text, not the table, correct?
Right, because the table only requires the width of the building, not the location of entrances.
Right.
He's talking more about the width of the building in his question. He refers to his townhome buildings as only being 17 feet wide, and they work. So,
Commissioner Wolf, I saw your hand.
Apples and oranges.
Yeah, I agree. We should take out that descriptive text. It's really not a good idea to put a specific number in there trying to illustrate something. It's just confusing. But yes, I agree completely that Matt is objecting to the overall width, not really, the question mentions the doorways, but it's the overall width that would be a problem for him. Sure. From the table. And I'm not sure what to do about it. We're really concerned that people are going to build ones that are too narrow. Again, it seems like it's an appearance issue, trying to make it look like a traditional downtown kind of thing, and trying to make the buildings look similar to each other. And I don't really see the benefit to it.
Because I guess ultimately what you're sorry, Commissioner Cahill, suggesting is that if someone proposes to do something, say, I think you said one of 8 feet, presumably they've got somebody that they know is interested in actually making use of that space, or, or that they're going for some quirky target market that really loves the idea of, living in a galley kitchen and walking past the kitchen to the bathroom and through the bathroom to the bedroom or whatever. Could be.
Right. If they wanted to go to 15 or 16,
right, exactly.
I don't think you're going to see a 12 or anything like that, but.
Commissioner Cahill? Did you have?
I was just going to say, I don't think we should be regulating doorways, how far apart they are, how wide a building should be. I don't really know what the considerations are on that. I don't think I'd want to live in one that was less than 18 feet, but maybe other people do, I guess.
Sounds to me like they do. That's the topic of, I think that he was saying that, oh no, it was the Durand, Albert and Durand. It wasn't Albert and Bailey.
The doors, you might want to have the doors next to each other because you have mirror layouts on the buildings, and you don't want certain things next to each other, to the neighbors.
I don't know. In this case, it seems to me that he's got an example that seems to work for them, and it's a foot less than what's being recommended as ideal. No? Commissioner or Ms. Schmidt?
We do what Commissioner Wolf had suggested, put it down to, I don't know, 14, 15, 16, not just down to 17.
Yeah, ultimately that's going to be driven by the market, right? I mean, I hate to see something be built that doesn't sell or doesn't rent, but thoughts? If we decide this, then we can wrap it up. Or do we, Commissioner Wolf, thank you.
Do we actually know that he would not have been able to do his project if this 18-foot was in place? Is that really the case, the reason he's objecting, or?
Is that the project? Do you recall, is that the one where they had 2 buildings and they had 2 buildings and they built an infill? And so presumably there was 34 feet between the 2 existing buildings or thereabouts. And that the 2, so in this case, yeah, it probably would, or he would have to reconfigure it.
They built a townhouse next to that, as I recall.
That's right. They built
They
one.
infilled in the middle there, and then next to it, there's a townhouse.
That also strikes me as the sort of thing that would be perfectly ripe for architectural variances. I mean, he's got, you're not going to move the buildings 2 feet to the north so you can fit an extra couple feet into your new townhouses, Commissioner Wolf.
Actually, wouldn't that be eligible for a ZBA variance? We haven't fully gotten into that subject as to how the ZBA is going to interact with the form-based standards. If they're going to be able to grant variances for every single dimensional thing in here, or.
And it would be it's not self-imposed hardship. It's certainly one, in that case, it would be unusual enough so as not to cause a repeated use of the same variance.
Well, I think in their case, if the townhouse was built off of the north side, I suspect they had to limit its width in order to meet the setback requirement from the lot. And on the ZBA, we definitely gave variances for things because there wasn't sufficient room on the lot. Things like putting in a garage that was too close to a lot line when there was no other way to put it in because the lot was so narrow. And
all right, let's just put it out there. Any objections to just leaving it at 18 for now and proceeding? Nobody's given any heartburn. But when we reach out to Matt, or maybe Commissioner Sullivan, I'll catch you in a sec. If I follow up with Matt on this, or if we have a discussion about it, think that probably to suggest that the avenue is a variance or a request for a relief from the standard. Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify if you were talking about the table on 30 or the descriptive text on 28, because I really do think they're saying two different things.
Both.
Okay.
That the descriptive text on 28 should be omitted, and that the table on 30 should stay for the time being.
I concur. Yeah.
In perpetuity. Yeah, I agree with you that one of them is a description and the other one is a regulation or a standard. All right. Thank you for your collective input tonight. That will close out this evening's review of the form-based shaping the avenue code. Move us on to item 10, commissioner concerns. I'm seeing no hands, and so I would, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
Boyle, so moved.
Thank you. Then moved by
Second.
Boyle and seconded by Commissioner Wolf. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Let's do a voice vote here. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed. We are adjourned at 9:50. Thank you all for your input, and we will see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night. Be safe.
Good night, everybody.
Say hello to everyone in Dublin, Kathy.
I will.